how could you say that Starfield failed or is a failure? I mean, after a month, it's still being played by quite a lot of people, so what the hell is this random Latvian even talking about? Well, just like the 10 out of 10 reviews on the launch by the lowest grade incompetent life forms on the planet, known as the gaming journalists, well, you can have something that's both popular, well, at least for a while, and not just be a flawed, but a giant turd. As an example, a month after release, Starfield fell behind Fallout 76 in review scores on Steam. Now, of course, there are good parts about the game. Even with that said, still, we come here for the failures, didn't we? And Starfield, boy, 7 out of 10, even that, if anyone else made this game, wouldn't have been this high. So, come with me and let's take a look at the failures of Starfield. Let's then start this off with exposing some lies.
Why did you not optimize this game for PC?
We did. It's running great. It is a next-gen PC game. We really do push the technology.
Yeah, no. In my own testing, I thought that something was wrong, but without proper tools, I could really only guess at what caused Starfield to be so GPU bottlenecked, even on my heavily CPU bottlenecked rig. The fact that there was no anti-aliasing, FOV, texture, frame limiter, and many other setting sliders in options on the launch made me think that the engine did some fucky things on the fly to target specific frame rate, even with dynamic resolution settings turned off. That was my best shot in the dark as to why indoors and outdoors of, let's say, New Atlantis looked so much differently visually. However, thanks to other creators, most notably Digital Foundry.
As an example, this walking area in Neon is supposed to be a populated part of that cyberpunk city, and with my optimized settings at 1440p FSR2 balance mode on the RTX 2070 Super, it runs at just a bit above 60 FPS. Do you think this looks right for the performance that you are seeing? In my mind's eye, I kind of want to say no, because I think of something like Cyberpunk 2077, where in similar scenarios, at my Alex's optimized settings with that same FSR2 balance mode at 1440p, well, I see a game there that looks similar in visual style and feature set for graphics, but it's running a good deal better on this 2070 Super than Starfield is. And these shots of Cyberpunk I'm showing here on the right also have ray traced local shadows enabled as well. So a game with ray tracing is running better than Starfield without ray tracing. If you're on Intel and Nvidia, you're getting a bizarrely worse experience here in comparison to AMD GPUs, in a way that is completely out of the norm. I mean, seriously, look up nearly any other benchmark of any other rasterized game. There's no really good reason why an RTX 3080 should perform this much worse than an RX 6800 XT. That issue, combined with the poor core and thread scaling on the Intel chip I specifically measured here above 6 cores, shows me that this game is only partially optimized at launch. It seems optimized for AMD systems, but not so much so for Intel and Nvidia ones. So I would say Bethesda needs to do some work in optimizing better for those platforms.
Even if Todd drank a jug of stupid juice or has some wildly different definition of a quote-unquote optimized game, this still is a lie. And adding
You may need to upgrade your PC for this game
is just out of touch, insincere, elitist patronizing. Now, even if you don't care much for the technical stuff, Starfield demands massive hardware horsepower to run it at acceptable frame rates. If you want to know how outrageous it is, just look. Starfield's PC specs are notably higher than Cyberpunk's, and they look like this. And for shits and giggles, Crysis Remaster recommended specs are lower than Starfield's minimum. Now let that sink in. So why? Well, Starfield is not like Cyberpunk, which even back in the day when it launched did try to push graphical fidelity, along with ray and later down the line path tracing methods. Or say something like Modern Warfare 2, which tried to push the general average visuals forward with appropriate optimization. Now, despite these games stumbling and having questionable success on achieving these things, at least you could see these visuals and fidelity being pushed. So, what is Bethesda doing with Starfield that is so great, so unique or industry leading that the game needs this much horsepower? Maps are small and downright ugly at times, there aren't a lot of models or details floating around either, no ray tracing or any other new tech. So what? What is taking up so much processing power? So tell me, Todd.
It is a next-gen PC game.
What the fuck does that even mean to you? I guess in Bethesda's mind, more polygons equal better graphics, right? A game full of hyper-poly assets to the level that Star Citizen or Escape from Tarkov would get envious. However, all of them serve little to no purpose. Who cares if the sandwich has thousands of polygons in it? Well, at least the faces are very detailed, and yet Bethesda thinks that this is the only thing that they need to convey emotion. But hey, I guess it fooled the shit-stained idiots we call gaming journalists. So task failed successfully. However, performance is more of a symptom to the wider technical problems. And yet, still funny that you could literally downgrade graphics by a half. And not only it would become more playable, let's say even maybe 60 frames a second on consoles that should have been there, but even tech specialists and enthusiasts like myself could probably not tell the difference between how it looked. So tell me, Todd, what is so
It is a next-gen PC game.
about Starfield? What tech are you pushing so hard that it demands the monstrous hardware specs? Cause I sure as fuck will say that Cyberpunk definitely looks better than you, and it runs better too. And it too is not that greatly optimized either. But okay, Bethesda is not known to be any kind of a leader in anything in this industry. Well, maybe except for this. And this. So, gameplay is the key, right? Well, like an amateur rally driver, we're jumping from one ditch into another. Exploration. Gee, for a game that's supposed to be making you feel like an explorer or spaceship captain and discovering things, you sure don't do much exploration. And even when you do, it's like a bargain basement cheap ripoff of what every other space game has done before. Yes, that includes the fucking Mass Effects. First, the fact that you can't circumnavigate the planet is a big one. Instead, you get tossed into a wide open but limited map that's gated off with literal invisible walls. Now, go fuck yourself. Second,
Why are there no vehicles on planets?
Something we consider, we're going to do outer space, we're going to do planets. Once you do vehicles, it does change the gameplay. So by focusing once you land in your ship, that you're on foot, it lets us really, for the players, make it an experience where we know how fast they're seeing things.
oh, sorry, what is this? Oh, what is this Skyrim footage doing in this Starfield video? Oh no! Now clearly there are no vehicles to minimize chances of players hitting the limits of these maps. Third, only a few points of interest. Because these maps are limited as fuck, things to do in them are also limited as fuck. The game spawns in literal handful of POIs around your landing site, while the rest of the map is a wasteland. It's not necessarily the worst thing, but it's a very blatantly forced one. Fourth, even scanning plants and animals feels half-assed. While you have to press and hold to scan a planet, to perform a scan on foot, you just walk up to a thing and press E and move on. Boy, Todd, do I feel like an explorer now. Fifth, and this is probably the biggest one, no matter which of the thousands of planets you land on, there always seems to be some random human machinery left behind. As an explorer, you know what I really like? Landing on a planet that no one has gone to before, stepping 10 steps out of my teleporting house, and seeing a rundown McDonald's right in front of me. Now, sure, what I'm feeling is exploration, yes, but in Detroit, rather than space. And sixth, there literally is no space exploration in space. Since your ship is more of a teleporting house than an actual spaceship, there is no space discoveries. Just random encounters that you always get when you teleport in. Again, feels very forced. And if you're one of those educated players who have tried, let's say, Elite Dangerous, No Man's Sky, or X4, boy, this in particular will feel insulting. Even putting direct discoveries aside, remember that skeleton floating under Jarl's house in Whiterun? Yeah, well, cities in Starfield don't have these unique and interesting hidden props and loot. Even in Cyberpunk, you would occasionally find something hidden away on the rooftops in this massive, sprawling city. Seriously, how hard was it to put a few skeletons posing on top of, let's say, New Atlantis UC security building, just for shits and giggles? So, as a game that tries to convey the feeling of discovery and exploration, it utterly fails. This failure reaches further than a few other problems because the game tries to do literal planets, and when there's frankly little to discover, well, I guess you can ask Elite Dangerous how that makes you feel at the end of the day. And while we're talking about the Starfield and how that makes you feel, well, you know what makes the game's world feel real and believable? The fact that the world reacts to your actions. In fact, it's one of the stronger points of Skyrim. Your actions oddly do affect, well, at least a few things. Sure, it's mild in comparison to something like immersive Sims, but at least it's good enough for the time. Now back to reactive worlds. You know, it's astonishing how boring everything becomes once the best your AI can do is run around like Roombas.
You know, Roomba cleans your house.
And then, of course, the best one came.
It's an epic role-playing game where you get to be who you want and go where you want.
Okay, so I want to kill all children. Ah, lame. Okay, well, at least I can kill everyone else, right?
Someone help me!
Oh, okay. Fuck you, Todd. Now, what else? Oh, illusion of choice. I haven't seen you in a while. Now, sure, in the recent times, Cyberpunk was dogged for basically the same problem. But, unlike Cyberpunk, Starfield insultingly dangles options and choices in your face constantly. But then...
I've heard nothing here to convince me that we should do anything but wait.
For the level of... What was that?
Oh, never mind. Even if you fucked up in the persuading someone to do something, here's the same result. Thanks for putting in extra effort. Fuck you. Long story short, Todd's old saying of,
Where you get to be who you want and go where you want.
is a bold-faced lie to anyone with modicum of brain power and skeptical thinking. The failure of the game's world lacking nearly any reaction to your actions creates the blandest, most boring and shallow universe. You know, I'm surprised that cops and guards even come after you steal or commit some crimes. It's a motherfucking miracle at this point. Shouldn't games become more complex and refined over time? Rather than being downgraded milquetoast version of their predecessors, not to mention competitors and peers. And speaking of downgrades, holy shit, did I not expect to find this many instances where Starfield is simply a lesser game in pure mechanics than its predecessors. Now, of course, you can check out the full list in this video, but to summarize, there is no swimming in the game, local maps somehow got worse, distinct lack of character animations and interactions, gun mods no longer are stored but destroyed upon new mod crafting, jail is now a loading screen without gameplay, no ammo crafting, no armor crafting, no weapon crafting, space dragon shells even upgraded feel actually weaker, there is no real encumbrance penalty, you can't fully loot enemies, no gore system, no companion orders, and shopkeepers no longer check what you're doing behind their backs, except sometimes they do? Or is this an AI bug or coding problem? And basically the list goes on. Now, of course, there are upgrades and that's expected. So to those whiny bitches saying that, oh, well, it's not a criticism if you don't highlight the positives. How about fuck you? Yes, it still is, but to make those babies happy. Outpost mechanics mostly are upgraded, but there are still notable downgrade aspects as well. Character faces and too many pointless props have too many polygons. FPS gameplay finally is actually mediocre. And that's a praiseworthy thing. Yes, I'm being serious. Not a hint of sarcasm, I promise. And finally, Starfield's probably the least buggy game release Bethesda has ever done. And yet, the point of this failure is most of all the word regress. Simple features that would add flavor and depth to Starfield, which clearly were present in their past games, were chosen not to be copied over like so many other things. Now, I can understand downgrading a mechanic for gameplay purposes. Think Sekiro, for example. But if you're going to do that, like Sekiro, you better have a good added reason for doing so. And Starfield simply does not. Even if copy-pasting is lazy, a good thing is a good thing regardless. Again, ask From Software. What's more, looking at the past Bethesda games, especially Skyrim and New Vegas, whoops, they didn't make that one, but well, regardless. Why should you play Starfield when the older games, frankly, feel like they have more to offer on mechanical level alone? Well, maybe it's because of the story, the space, the new setting is a wholly new one. And sure, if medieval magic game does not work for you, if Kitty's first post-apocalyptic Americana is not your jam, well maybe space exploration discovery— oh wait, hold on, we talked about that. Well, maybe futuristic space game, kinda, is your jam. Sadly, in typical Bethesda fashion, the main story is bad. Now, at first, like many other reviewers, I summarized the story as being somewhat bad and with a very slow burn. Even the few blessed souls who managed to turn off their brains and eventually like the story said that it only becomes good at the end of Act 2, which takes 20 or so hours of playtime. Still, you got side quests. They surely can scratch an itch, right? After delving deeper and sensing that something was not quite right, now I can proclaim nearly all stories in Starfield, be they side quests, small interactions, or the main big one, are really boring, if not downright insultingly bad. I'll try not to spoil too much here, plus I want to delve deeper into this topic in my hypercritical review down the line. But first, the presentation. You see, stories in Starfield for the most part happen by you talking to a character, pretty standard stuff. However, even the act of talking to someone is where the problems lie. You see, for some reason, ever since Fallout 4, once you engage with a character, Bethesda grabs your camera, violently rips it out of your face like Doomslayer rips Cacademon's eye out and shoves it directly in front of the character you're talking with in a medium frontal shot. Always! This has two problems. First, you always see this stupid angle, and trust me, Starfield has a lot of dialogue. They even boasted about this. And this angle already is the most boring shot you can ever take. Now, I'm not a film student, and even my dumb fuck ass knows that. So, it gets very, very, very repetitive and monotone fast. So how the fuck are you gonna create a compelling scene? Oh, wait, hold on. You won't! Let's work for the screenwriters. Oh, but hold on, do we even have screenwriters? And the other problem, or solution, depending on how you look at it, is that all you ever will see is a character's upper body. So even if there were animations and gestures, all you would see is a cut down versions. And you know, I'd like to be naive and say that, oh well, they did this for the optimal look. No, sadly I can't. I suspect that this is to mask the lack of animations and definitely scene creation. This became so apparent when I booted up Cyberpunk. Sure, they cinematography the fuck out of these animations and scenes to the level of actual movie screenwriting. But hell, it's so engaging. And then you compare it to something like this.
I guess I'd want the same thing.
Excuse me, Marshall?
Not now, Alex. We're in a meeting.
I know, but this is important. I've done it. I've cracked the encryption on the slates.
And boy, the moment when you talk to a character and some random supporting actor runs into the room and starts talking, camera immediately cuts to them. You know what I feel at that point? Like I was hit by a fucking semi-truck. There is no sense of place, and worst of all, there actually are no scenes in this game. The best you're ever gonna get is something like this. And that's not a scene, it's just a simple animation. And if you're wondering, there's barely a handful of these types of animations throughout the whole game. I shit you not. Now, of course, TheYamiks is being very hypercritical, but can you really call this a scene? Sure, in a traditional sense, I guess you could say that they are there, like characters sitting in the board meeting like in Ryujin's questline, but whatever character pacing, placement, animations, and actions could there be in this scene are utterly obliterated by one thing: zero fucks given about screenwriting and presentation of the story. Whoever made the decision to have a camera ripped out of your face did so as a cost-cutting measure, and nothing else. In fact, I found so many moments where lighting in the room, the scene, was so bad that whenever a camera was ripped out of your face, it also was given a flashlight to illuminate the character's face, rather than having actual lighting in the scene. I only have one thing to say to the writers of Starfield. Scenes, motherfucker, do you speak it? Oh, but I'm not done. So, Bethesda think that whatever leftover value in these side quests could be salvaged by three things: action, that happens when you're not talking with the characters, the dialogue value itself, or the consequences. Now, let's skip the analysis of consequences and remember that illusion of choice. Yeah, that one pretty much killed any meaning of consequences. You could even say that consequences are quite inconsequential. Wanna be a super bad guy? Well, guess what? You can't kill everyone. Even when you are allowed to blow up a whole generation ship, no one cares. Kill everyone in Ryujin or pirate questlines? All you get is less credits. Oh wow, much consequences indeed. Now, as for the action, well, my favorite one thus far was the Terramorph attack on New Atlantis. Now, that should tell you enough about already, but for those who haven't played through, all that happens is the city lights, or rather specifically one part of the city, namely the starport, its lights turn red, a few debris props appearing here and there, and the spaceport is attacked by 3 Terramorphs. Yeah, that's about it. I shit you not. Yeah. So all that now is left is the dialogue. Will that save the story? Yeah, no.
We'd need to know the name of the star system, wouldn't we? No systems named finite or add. That just leaves in and dumb.
Me, and I thought my video scripts were long-winded, boring drivel at times, but Jesus, fuck dancing on Shakespeare's grave. Not only characters take a dramatic
Is he alright?
pause after every line, but no one proofread this drivel. Characters just go on and on in tangents. Now, I'm not a writer, so it's kinda hard to put in obvious terms, but the general lack of short, sharp, and concise dialogue is there, and Cyberpunk precisely displays how it's done. Each line, each action is to drive the plot forward. Even in optional side questions, actors in the scene answer precisely and directly in a charming manner. Starfield doesn't do that. I've never experienced this before. Well, maybe in Starpoint Gemini, but that's a whole different bad story writing. So pair boring and long-winded, often pointless dialogue with zero action, zero scene anything, and a single monotone camera angle, and even the best story will evaporate faster than a dog in a particle accelerator. After sitting down and examining this, I realized, on the first glance, every story in Starfield feels boring. But why? And that one question, why, led me to realize all of them are bad. To anyone out there, I dare you to find me a good story in Starfield. I'm serious, I want to be proven wrong, so poke me on Discord and let me know. It's astonishing how much more interesting even Skyrim's main questline becomes just because the game does not rip your face off and place it in the optimal cumshot distance. And that's nothing to say about the value of the dialogue itself. Sure, it may be a lot of it, but just like dog shit, just because there's a lot of it doesn't make it good. And that is not all. The story, the game, the tone, everything is so sanitized. Now, as I'm looking at the script, this segment alone is the longest one, so I'll be short here. There is no gore, you can't kill children, in fact, all main characters can't be killed. Even the the poverty-stricken underbelly of New Atlantis is so clean and cuddly, yet the game tries to have that edge. so long as the game can fit in the PG rating or whatever. It's just lamentable and most of all pathetic. Sure, Cyberpunk has this super stylized, super serious, grown-up, sex, drugs and rock and roll friend, but at least it didn't pretend to have something it didn't. Well, story tone-wise at least. So remind me, what's so good, or hell, even okay about Starfield's story? And yet, the worst failure of Starfield comes in the form of loading screens, and sometimes menus. For a solid decade at least, open-world games have more and more shifted into ever more seamless experiences, namely masking and erasing the need to disrupt the player's gameplay. And worst offender of this gameplay disruption has always been the loading screen, where the player's good time comes to a screeching halt like the nails on the chalkboard as the player is presented with a pulsating UI penis instead of the gameplay, closely followed by the UI that is not present in-game. There is a reason why original Dead Space was so praised, thanks to incorporating elevators that unload the level that you came from and loading the following one ahead of you, and a UI that existed as part of an environment, not a blank screen or even a HUD element. It was extremely immersive, despite being a third-person game. Even space games like, let's say, No Man's Sky, and most notably Elite Dangerous, utilizes clever loading screens that feel like actual gameplay during the level transition between star systems. And then Starfield shouts out this. Still, even if Bethesda incorporated some kind of transitional animation or cut down gameplay like Elite Dangerous, there still would be far too many loading screens. Case in point, single rooms. Of all the lazy and backwards things to bring back from 1990s, and I shit you not, 1990s, single room loading screens. Why? Actually, it's quite a good question. Why does Starfield need so many loading screens when in a modern age, asset streaming is becoming so commonplace? Now, of course we can speculate on a few things, but the best educated guesses we have is the motherfucking creation engine. Originally called NetImmerse in 1997, let that sink in, before it was named Gamebryo in 2003, and let that sink in. This engine was taken in by Bethesda, and first game using it was Oblivion. Again, let that sink in. Since then though, Bethesda has genuinely improved it to incredible level. However, the engine was based off on old archaic tech, essentially limiting what the size of the map is or how it's basically connecting maps between each other. Back in 1990s, asset streaming, well, technically speaking, yes, there was some development made on it, but it really wasn't possible because of, well, simply the hardware's limitations. So instead, what the games often did was load everything in the RAM, which was at the time the fastest, and still is the fastest part of the memory aside from the CPU cache, and loaded stuff from there. So to change these limitations for the engine would really mean that you would have to pretty much scrap the engine, or at least a big chunk of it, and that's, well, that takes a long time and often is not really worth it either. And so, today, these limitations still exist. This is why, even if it's bizarre that single rooms literally need to be loaded, when you remember that tech it came from, well, at least you can understand it. So, loading levels is a fundamental limitation of the engine. Okay, but the game still could be good, and yes, that is true. However, Starfield attempts to make a space game. While now it is possible to make a loading screen game-based space game, asset streaming has proven to be the biggest benefit, most of all for the genre. See, loading screens aren't as noticeable when you have some kind of overworld. Skyrim and Fallout both have it, but what is the overworld for Starfield? What is the big gameplay map where you spend most of your time running about? Galaxy map. Well, that's the closest it got. Yes, a fucking menu is your overworld. Now, unlike Fallout and Skyrim, there is no one big map that you, the player, can spend the time enjoying the gameplay in. And even this is ruined by something that usually is a good feature in these games, but in Starfield it only exacerbates the loading screens. The fast traveling. Fact that there are very few places you can't use fast traveling from utterly derails any kind of feeling of gameplay immersion. If the player had to walk back to the exit of a dungeon and then walk up to their ship and then walk to the cockpit inside of the ship, the game immediately would feel so much more different. And it's kind of funny that forcing the player to do certain boring and often tedious things actually can be a lot more immersive. Don't believe me? Try playing Elite Dangerous or Star Citizen. Actually, especially Elite Dangerous. It too has small, noticeable loading moments as your ship changes environments, but it never gives you the option to fast travel. Yes, the game becomes very slow and often very boring waiting simulator due to the distances you need to manually fly to. However, Elite also is the most immersive space game out there because of it, and only in a good way too. While Star Citizen goes a step beyond and forces you to carry individual boxes and click select buttons to open cockpits and doors to even enter the ship to begin with. These seemingly tedious tasks, despite their bad connotations, actually are very, very, very good design choices. You see, you can't have shortcuts and immersion at the same time. And so Starfield, on the other hand, goes the extreme opposite end of this and allows you to skip far, far too many things, to a point that the game becomes more loading screens and menu opening than actual gameplay.
I was making a critique of the coffee here.
Jesus Christ, you can teleport right into the city. Oh, you can. Why? So no scanning again. What? So you don't need to go through scans? But excuse me, what the fuck is this game? Is there any semblance of structure?
I enjoy exotic foods from... And you made it back? I trust you've brought... Excellent. And now, if you...
Now, tell me, was that even a good gameplay? Even compared to Fallout or Skyrim, it's abysmal. And why wouldn't player use it? It's faster and easier. And yet, what it does in turn for the whole game is take its immersion and blows its brains out in the town square. That's how violent this fast-traveling loading screen laden gameplay turns out as. Like I joked a while back, you don't feel like you're traveling and flying a spaceship. You're the menu man teleporting everywhere with your teleporting house. Even the glimmers of gameplay, mostly combat, that's fun anymore, is just a brief distraction between countless menus and loading screens. I talked how Starfield is a downgrade, a regression of Bethesda's old games, and boy, fast-traveling loading screens are the best, or should I say the worst examples of how bad it becomes. And like Mr. Plinkett once said,
"Some so subtle you might not have even noticed." but your brain did.
Excessively boring story on the first glance that becomes increasingly worse the more you think about it, being presented in the blandest possible way, with little to no action or fanfare, and this is the best you'll ever get to see. I shit you not. While the overarching tone of exploration and discovery doesn't exist in space at all and on the planet, it's akin to checking out boxes on the checklist at best. A stale, static world that never reacts to anything you do in a meaningful sense, all compounded by ugly environments plastered with hyper-poly models and subpar optimization that borders on blatant lies, thanks to the face of the company.
Why did you not optimize this game for PC?
We did. It's running great. It is a next-gen PC game.
If you turn off your brain, maybe thinking for you is a bit too hard. Sure, Starfield has loads to do in it, and there are quests to fulfill, so as long as you keep your brain smooth, Starfield might even entertain you. Sure, combat is actually decent for once, until you realize that some of the skills haven't even been play-tested or most weapons are unbalanced while the whole game is designed to be based on grinding. Sure, until you realize all that, Starfield is flawed, but okay game, right? Sadly though, thanks to these failures, Starfield ends up being extremely boring. In some sense, it is better than being bad, but when it comes to being remembered, you know, I'd much rather have Cyberpunk, a bad game that improved itself and was actually memorable for both good and the bad, even today. And there you go, these are the biggest failures for Starfield, a regressive, lazy, copy-paste job they turned into their own new unique IP, which kind of becomes suspect in of itself, considering that something like No Man's Sky exists. So there you go, hopefully you enjoyed it, and well, hey, if you did, I would really greatly appreciate some support on the Patreon, cause hey, this thing makes it work, basically, or this sort of stuff work. Overall, go check out the other parts of this mini-series, you know, failures of video games. There are a couple of interesting things on Elite, Kerbal, and a few other ones. Namely Overwatch, but regardless, check out the Patreon, support if you can, and if you deem this content worthy of support, there's a lot more to say about this topic overall, and I will. Hypercritical is something I am aiming to do. When that will come out, who knows, but until then, you got this, a sort of a glimpse into what is to come. So, thanks for watching, and tell me, what is worse, becoming boring or being outright bad? Fallout 76 or Starfield?